Okay, welcome everyone to Masechet Ketubot. Nice to have you on our first day of learning Masechet Ketubot, Ketubot Daf Bet. All Masechtot start on Daf Bet. That may be for another time. The Siyum hasn't happened yet. It's happening. If you're joining the English Siyum, it's happening on Sunday. If you haven't registered, you can still register. If you're new, I just want to go through a few basic things, or maybe if you're not new, you might know all these things. But you can listen to the Shiur on podcast. You can subscribe on a podcast application. It's all on the subscribe page on our site. You can go on YouTube and you can watch it, just all the shiurim on YouTube if you'd like, and watch a video. All of it is also on our site. You can join a WhatsApp group to get links to every day's shiur, and then you'll just have it, and all the weekly shiurim. We have other content by other women as well. So if you join the WhatsApp group, where you get the links, everything will be sent to you, and you can just click from there and go straight to the website, or you can go straight to the website on your own if you'd like. Those are all different ways. You could join a community WhatsApp group, as I mentioned the other day. You can join the Zoom at 7:15 in the morning, Israel time, wherever you are around the world. Anyway, enough introductions with that. I want to now start with Masechet Ketubot. So first, I want to just talk about our dedications for today. Today's daf is sponsored by Suri Stern in honor of Rabbanit Michelle, who rocked teaching this long and hard Masechet Yevamot, and my sisters in Hajj on Long Island who persevered through this difficult Masechet with their usual humor. Lechu Michael El Chaim. And today's daf is sponsored by the Hadron women of Cheshmonaim, to Phyllis, Gittel Pasha Bat Masha Rachel, for continued refuah. In addition to being a pillar of chesed and Torah learning in our community, you become so central in our daf learning, creating a WhatsApp daf Yomi group with daily posts and other related materials so we can access it with the flick of a finger. You have left us with huge shoes to fill in your absence, and we're waiting for your return in good health and vigor as we continue to daven for you daily. Ken Yehi Ratzon. Okay, Ketubot. So Ketubot is all about, well, it's not all about ketubah, and in fact, it's a little bit of a misnomer because people call it also shas katan or mafteach shel shas, which means like a mini shas or the key to all of the shas, because there's so many basic sugyot in shas that come up in ketubot. Because of that, it's one of the main masechtot learned in the yeshivas. They don't learn daf yomi, right? I mean, some people might learn daf yomi, but they don't teach daf yomi as the main way of learning Gemara. They usually learn a few masechtot, and there's a rotation of which ones. Ketubot is often the main one of the ones learned because it's got a lot of central topics in. Okay, if you have it, get read Gita's introduction, which gives a lot of good background information, and Ayala Lipson Shiur, which gives a very broad overview of the Masechet. Everything she says is what I would basically want to put into an intro shiur, but we don't have intro shiur going on here because we're learning every day the daf. So it's a really good basic information and overview of the entire Masechet, which gives you the proper background that you need. I will talk about a few basic things that will help us particularly for today's daf, and as we get to different things, I'll give you the background information you need. So the first thing you need to know is that in those days, they didn't get married like we did. We get married nowadays, people get engaged. That has zero halachic significance. And yes, one more thing. We have bookmarks. I meant to mention that. There's bookmarks that we made in the beginning of Seder Nashim on all of Seder Nashim. You can order them. There's a link on today's daf as well. And you can also find it on the website under tools. There's a way to order the bookmarks. You can order them. We're going to do another delivery in a few weeks. So if you order them now, you'll hopefully get them in a little while. If you didn't get your bookmarks, we keep getting ones returned to us because the address is wrong. Something's off. Anyway, be very careful. You write your address correctly and get us your information, and we will, if you didn't get them, you can let us know and we'll mail them out again. Okay, so nowadays, our engagement has no halachic significance whatsoever. People go to get married, you go to the chuppah, right? Usual wedding. Under the chuppah, the first thing they do is the bercha erusin, okay, which is erusin kiddushin is all the same terminology. It means the same thing. It means betrothal. We do that under the chuppah. What happens is women until a wedding are basically permitted to everybody. The erusin, the engagement, forbids them to everybody in the world, basically. They can't be together with any man. What the nisuin does, which is the second part of the wedding ceremony, is it permits her specifically to that one man. And then she's an eshet ish, she can't marry anybody else. So already at erusin, she can't marry anyone else, and she needs a get from erusin, if you remember, we've talked about. She needs to get divorced from engagement. That's why we don't do engagement nowadays until under the chuppah. Okay, because if someone breaks an engagement, they'll have to get a get. We prefer to avoid that. But in those days, that's what they would do. They would generally have a year-long erusin period. What we do nowadays to separate between them, we read the ketubah in the middle as a way of just separating between the erusin and the nisuin, which is done with the sheva brachot. So in those days, they would have a year to prepare. Okay, we're going to talk about this later today. Our Mishna is going to start off. That's enough for our intro for now. Whatever information we need as we go on, I will explain. This is not exactly what I would have expected the first Mishna to tell you, which is a virgin gets married on Wednesdays, and if she's a widow, or really what it means is not a virgin for any reason, she gets married on Thursday. Okay, what? We're getting a history lesson here. You know, people generally get married in June, right? June, beginning of July. Is that what we want? Like, that's wedding season? Well, no, in those days, wedding seasons were every Wednesday. Seems like a bit of a strange Mishnah. Why? Why can't you just get married any day of the week you want, right? Nowadays, people get married any day of the week they want, right? Maybe more people get married on Sundays if you don't live in Israel, right? But if, you know, Sunday's a day off, so a lot of people get married on Sundays. But why are they telling us this? So first, before I continue to read the Mishnah, we're going to see that there's a number of reasons to this, even though the Mishnah really gives one. And the Gemara is going to have issue with that. And Safrai, Mishnah Eretz Yisrael, he writes that it's very likely that this Mishnah the reason wasn't actually put in the Mishnah, because we're going to see various different reasons. Okay. The Yerushalmi gives a reason that's more connected to Maaseh Bereshit. Ayelet Lipson speaks very nicely about how there's different approaches to marriage. She talks about even historically, it developed more so the relationship between the husband and wife rather than just being, you know, a monetary and in order to have children, a very, can't think of the word, but a practical kind of thing rather than an emotional kind of relationship, but that there's two elements. So the one that talks about Maaseh Bereshit, it's a little bit more connected to the relationship element rather than the one that's talking about Yom Revi'i and Yom Chamishi, which is a little bit more technical, practical. Monetary, we'll talk about that it has to do with monetary issues potentially. Anyway, so we're going to see some other answers to this question, but right now the Mishnah seems to give one answer. 2 days of the week, the Batei Din would meet, the courts would meet. Okay, in a minute we'll get back to why the courts meet. Why is that relevant? The courts would meet on Mondays and Thursdays. This was from takana Ezra. Ezra instituted this. This is why we have laning on those 2 days. This is why Megillah, if you remember all that, those 2 days. Now, what's the relevance? If he found out after the assumption is they get married on Wednesday. By the way, Tosfot says clearly they got married during the days and not at nights, okay? Because at night, then they wouldn't have enough time to have a bilat mitzvah, okay? Even though nowadays we have weddings usually at night, they go very late. You can still do bilat mitzvah at night. But anyway, they claim Wednesday, because why? Because Wednesday really halachically is Tuesday night, Wednesday. So it would have to be called Thursday, right? Leil Chamishi would already be the night. Anyway, it's not so important. But they get married Wednesday. They have relations Wednesday night. And then he realizes she's not a virgin. Now, why is this a relevant issue? Or not why, it obviously is somewhat relevant, but what is the relevance of it? So there's two potential issues. And it's not clear which one is the major factor. One is that in giving a ketubah to the wife, okay, now let's do a little intro on ketubah. What is ketubah? Ketubah is a document that lists the commitments of the husband to the wife, also the wife to the husband, within a marriage relationship, and if the marriage relationship ends. Okay, in the event of death or divorce of the husband, it goes to the wife. She gets a certain amount of money. She gets, as long as she doesn't take her big ketubah money, which is the amount committed to her, she can get monthly stipend for food. Okay, once she's ready to go get married to somebody else, she has to give up on her ketubah, so she gets the big lump sum. She goes and demands it in court. She gets it and moves on. Then she doesn't get mazono anymore. So there's a certain amount that the woman is promised in the event of death or divorce. Okay. Besides, again, we'll get into all the details of what all the things are in the ketubah as we go along this masechet. But right now, we're talking about this amount of money that she's promised. She's promised 200 zuz if she's a virgin. If she's not a virgin, she's promised 100 zuz only. She gets half the amount. So, okay, we're not going to get into why that is, right? It was, again, societal. They were seen as, if you haven't been with anyone else, right, they were more of a better pick, okay? Part of the whole reason of a ketubah was to encourage, first of all, we don't want the man to divorce the woman easily, so he has to give her a sum of money if he's going to divorce her. That's to prevent divorce, okay? But her value was dependent on whether she was a virgin or not. I really don't want to get into that today. Maybe another time we'll discuss it. So now, number one, it's a financial issue. So he claims, why did I promise her 200 zuz? She wasn't a virgin, only 100. But the other issue is, let's go back to what I said before about Erusin Nisun. Erusin happened a year before. Once she's alus to him, remember, she's now forbidden to everybody, which means that but she's already designated to this person. Now, she's not allowed to be with him yet, but she's designated to him, which means that they're already, so to speak, somewhat married, halachically, which means that if she's with someone else, okay, during the time between the engagement and the marriage, what happens? Remember, we learned in Yavamot, if someone commits adultery, and adultery is also from Erusin, because if she slept with someone before, so she was permitted at that point to everybody. You're not supposed to have premarital relations, but it's not you weren't an Eshet Ish at all. But at this point in Erusin, once you get engaged, betrothal, you're already designated specifically to this person. If you're with somebody else, you're considered an Eshet Ish. That's pretty serious. Not only is it serious, what it means if you were with someone else in between, you're forbidden to your husband and you're forbidden to the person you were with. But what's important now is that his wife, turns out, wasn't a virgin, and now he doesn't know when was she with another man. Maybe she's forbidden to him and she can't be together with him. So Rashi says, and now the question becomes, okay, there's two issues here. Number one, it says, so because the Batei Din would sit on Yom Sheni and Yom Chamishi, Shimayalo Tanat Betulim Ayamashkim Lebeitin. We want him to go the very next morning to the court. So we want it on a day that the courts are in session that next morning. Why are we in such a hurry? So Rashi says, if you look in Rashi, it's about 5 lines from the top or 6 lines. There's a bracket there. When the bracket starts, it says, V'im yesh shehut b'intayim. If we wait, yesh lachush. Shema yitpayes v'tizkarer da'ato v'yikaymena. We're worried he might, right? When you're very angry about something, when it immediately happens, you're really angry. You're going to do something about it right away. But if you can't go to court that next day, and then it pushes off a few more days, you might just not bother. Now, why do we care? Well, Shema yizim tatachtav v'nes'alav. We care because it might actually be forbidden for you to be with her. So then, right, I'm going to skip a little bit. And then, umitoch she'yavo lebeitin. Now, the question is, how, if he claims she's not a virgin, he has no proof when she was with another man. Was it before the engagement or after the engagement? So what does it help? So Rashi says, mitoch she'yavo lebeitin yitbarer hadavar k'sheyetze hakol shema yavo edim. Once he comes to court, it will be clear, because everybody hears that they went to court. And therefore, people will say, oh, yeah, I noticed she was with some other guy. They went into a room, blah, 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 and maybe they can prove either which way. So we think that if he comes to court right away, number one, he won't push it off and just not deal with it. And then what's the benefit of going to court? Then people might come forward. So Rashi seems clearly to be concerned with the Eshet Ish issue and not the monetary issue. But it could be also there's a monetary issue at stake, and that's unclear from this Mishnah. There's a lot of things unclear from this Mishnah. The other one I see you asked in the chat, which is obvious, which is why not, if there's 2 days the court meets, why not get married on Sunday? So obviously the Gemara is going to deal with that question. So the first thing we have is a very unclear statement, which is going to be made clear that it's unclear. So don't worry if you don't really understand it. Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef now says, he quotes, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Quotes Rav Yehuda, who said in the name of Shmuel, why did they say this? Now again, if the Mishnah really included the reason, there would be no reason for him to ask this question. So this is maybe a potential proof for Safrai, who claims that the Mishnah really didn't give the reason originally. And in any case, they ask, why do we say this? And then the answer is not going to really answer the question. The question sounds like, why did they get married on Wednesday nights? The answer is not really that. So the answer, the Fisha Shaninu, because of a Mishnah that appears on Daf Nun Zayin. Okay, that Mishnah says, Higia Zman V'lo Nisu. Remember I said they would get engaged. And then they would say, we're going to get married in a year. So a year on the clock comes up, let's say on a Sunday. So comes the date, V'lo Nisu. Ochlot Mishalo V'ochlot B'truma. We've already learned, if you remember, in Yivamo, but again, there might be some of you who are new to this. In any case, you might not remember. So I'll remind you, which is, when you get engaged, the woman, if she marries a Kohen, for example, she doesn't eat truma yet, right? There were certain reasons why they instituted that she can't eat truma. We'll see that. It comes up in Ketubot. We'll see it later. She doesn't eat truma until she actually gets married. Also, he doesn't have to sustain her. He doesn't have to pay her mizonot until they're actually married, not when they're engaged. Because when they're engaged, the assumption is she's living in her father's home. This, by the way, is all in the Galil and Yehuda. They had a different minhag, if you remember. They used to be mityache with their husbands. They would live with them already. And anyway, that's a whole separate thing. We'll get into that later. Yeah. If the time came where you designate, so as soon as they get married, starts the clock from ticking, he has to pay her mizonot. What if the date came and he didn't marry her and he was supposed to? So that's going to be a lot of our discussion today. So here's Higiyazman, the time came, and they didn't get married. They already start eating from his food, meaning he has to sustain her already at that point because they set the date of the wedding. Okay. And she can eat truma. So now what's the relevance to our point? Well, let's say it fell on a Sunday. So a year passes, it's Sunday. But what did the rabbis say? You only get married on Wednesday. So does he have to start paying mizonot or not? No, he doesn't. To tell you, the clock only starts ticking. He only has to start paying mizonot from the day of that week that he could potentially marry her, which is Wednesday. So if it fell on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, he doesn't have to pay mizonot till Wednesday. Now, that's answering a different question. That's saying why. That's sort of answering my question is, what is the history lesson? Or we want to know, culturally, what did people do? When did they get married in those days? No, right. So that's not what it's coming for. It's coming to teach you a halacha that when it says the date came and he didn't start, and he doesn't have right, and he has to start paying her mizonot, it's only from Wednesday of that week because he can't marry her at the beginning of the week because of this takana of the rabbis, and therefore we're going to say not his fault. We're going to get back to this issue of not his fault later. What else maybe could be considered not his fault? Is it just this or other things? Right? This is not his fault because the rabbis made a takana. That might be different than not his fault, like he got sick. Okay? So we'll get back to that soon. So Rav Yosef, who said this, now questions this. Now, either Rashi suggests that often Rav Yosef forgot things he said, and maybe because of that, or maybe he quotes it and says, but I have an issue with it. Anyway, Rav Yosef says, married to Avram, just like a way of swearing in the name of Avram, right? The master of Avram, like swearing in the name of God, really. Master of Avram, Tali Tanya, but Lo Tanya, you're depending one Mishna on a Mishna that wasn't really a Mishna. Okay, Lo Tanya. In other words, you're depending our Mishnah on some other Mishnah that's not really a Mishnah. To which they say, what are you talking about? Hey Tanya, vehelo Tanya. Which is the Mishnah that is a Mishnah? Which is the Mishnah that's not a Mishnah? Like both are Mishnahs. Ha Tanya, vaha Tanya. That's a Mishnah and this is a Mishnah. What do you mean? It's something that wasn't taught or wasn't a proper Mishnah. This is a Mishnah, that's a Mishnah. I don't even understand what you're saying. Ella, what he meant to say is, Tali Tanya de mefarish tama, but de Tanya de lo mefarish tama. You're depending a Mishnah that has a reason in it on a different Mishnah that doesn't have a reason in it. In other words, our Mishnah already gave us a reason. So why are you depending on that Mishnah, which doesn't give a reason? And this Mishnah already gave a reason. So that can't possibly be his question. Okay, so now they're going to say, so because of that, they're going to say, this connection to the Mishnah and the way he said, why is a betrothal married on Wednesday? And the answer is because of that Mishnah. Okay, really what they're saying is, in other words, I'll just say it simply, that Mishnah doesn't answer the question of this Mishnah, right? This Mishnah already answered the question, why I'm Revi'i, because of Tanat Betulim, and we want the Beit Din to be open. So that can't possibly be what he said, what he asked, because that's the question of our Mishnah, and the answer is given in our Mishnah. So, what he really meant to say was the following. So basically, erase what we saw until now, because they basically asked a question and gave an answer, which wasn't really the right answer to that question. And it doesn't really make any sense. So let's start again. So now they're quoting really from our Mishnah, right? Why did they say Betulah was married on Wednesday? The Beit Din. Keep saying that by accident. The Beit Din. So we go early to the court. Okay, so far, quote from our Mishnah. Now comes the question, and it's the question that you asked before. Why not on Sunday? Then you could go to the court on Monday. It would be very good. Well, Shakdu Chachamim al Takana Benot Israel. shetorech b'suda shlosha yamim, אחד בשבת, שני בשבת, ושלישי בשבת, וברביעי כונסה. There's another issue. It's not just Tana B'tulim. It's that the rabbis said that we want to take care of the Bnei Yisrael. We'll talk in a minute why this is exactly taking care of Bnei Yisrael. If you recall, when we learned Masechet Yevamot, it came up in one of the sugyot, that the man's family was responsible for the wedding. Okay, they paid for the whole wedding. They did the food. We wanted to make sure that the women get the proper wedding that they deserve, and the men have time to prepare the food. It's funny, right? The men preparing the food, but it really means the man's family, I assume. So their family has to prepare the food. So now what does it mean? They need time. They can't have Shabbos in the middle, right? Remember, no refrigerators, freezers, anything like that. They need 3 days to put the meal together, and you don't want Shabbat in the middle. First of all, you have to prepare for Shabbat also, right? It's like when Yontif comes out on Monday, who has time to prepare for Yontif? You end up with a 2-day Chag. If you're, not in Israel, you end up, or Rosh Hashanah. Who has time? You're busy preparing for Shabbat, and then you have to prepare. So they don't want Shabbat in the middle. So they said Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So theoretically, you could have got married Sunday because of betulim, but there's another factor at stake. Okay, and then you get married on Wednesday. Okay, now we still want to connect it to that Mishna because he did say something about that Mishna on Daf Nun Zayin. Well, now that we learned Shakdu and that you can't get married on Sunday, now Otasha Shaninu Higia Zman V'lo Nisu Achlot B'Shalov Achlot B'Torah Higia Zman B'Cha B'Shabbat Mitoch She'eno Yachol Lichnos Eino Malel Mizonot. So now that we have that, the other Mishnah now takes on a different meaning. That Mishnah says if the date came and he didn't marry her, he has to give her Mizonot. Connect that with our Mishnah and say, well, not if it was Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday. Okay, if it happened on Sunday, he doesn't, right? The date fell on Sunday. He has till Wednesday because we have this takana of the rabbis that said, don't get married till Wednesday. So it's not his fault that he's not marrying her. And therefore, if it's not his fault, and it's this takana of the rabbis, we don't make him responsible to feed her until Wednesday. Okay, forget about, maybe he'll be nice and give her food, but we're talking purely from a legal standpoint. Is he responsible or is he not? So that's going to lead us now to whole sugya off of Ketubot, really, and into this issue of onus. Okay, what if something happens beyond your capabilities? So now the Gemara says, Lefichach, therefore, one can infer from here, not just because it was a takana of the rabbis, but halahu, osha chaltahi, osha pirsanida, he got sick and they couldn't do the wedding on time. She got sick, they couldn't do the wedding on time. She ended up with her menstruating right then. Okay, now nowadays we do chupat nidan, there's ways around it, but ideally you shouldn't and better off to just push off the wedding. Eino ma'alela mizonot. So he doesn't have to give her mizonot. Okay, that's the first opinion. Any kind of what we call onus. Okay, this is a very interesting topic because it comes up in a lot of topics. Okay, today we're going to see it specifically in weddings and in terms of his responsibility to give mizonot. We're going to basically say onus, he's not responsible right now. Although we're going to have in a minute some people who question this. And we're also going to have what if this happens in get? Okay, what if a get was given on condition and the condition wasn't fulfilled because of onus? He meant to fulfill the condition, but he didn't. So does that count? Okay, we're going to see that. We're going to move from there to onus there. So, now, even though this first opinion said, once you say because of the takana chachamim, he couldn't marry her, he's not responsible for the food. Also, if he got sick, she got sick, any sort of onus. The second opinion is not so sure. Some people question this and say, halahu mahu. Let's start with the question, what if he is sick? Do we say, hatam tama mai mishum da'anis, v'hachanami ha'anis? The fact that he couldn't do it because the rabbis instituted only on Wednesday was not his fault. Likewise, him getting sick was not his fault. And therefore, it's the same thing. Oh, Dilma, or perhaps we say, hatam anis b'takanta diskino le'Rabbanit. Ha chalo. Or do we say there he was anus in a takana that the rabbis instituted, but here not. In other words, maybe only because it was a takana of the rabbis, we give you those extra days and you don't have to pay. But if it was his own fault, even if it wasn't really his fault, but it was his doing, maybe not. And within that, Im Tim Tzalomer, this is a classic Gemara. Well, we don't know the answer to that, but let's go with, right? It's like a flow chart. And if you're going to say, Chalahu ma'alel mizonot, if he got sick, he still has to give her mizonot because it's right, it's his fault. Well, even though he was honest, but still, maybe it's still his fault. What if she gets sick? Okay. Matze amrala ana hakaina. Can he say, look, I'm here. It's your fault, not my fault. I'm ready to get married. The fact that you're sick is not my problem. I don't have to give you mizono. Or can she say, look, your field got ruined with water, meaning, right? Like this is if you buy a field, okay, and the next day there's a flood in the field, something happened, there's a terrible rain pour out, something goes wrong. Say, sorry, you bought it from me, it's your tough luck now, it's your field. Okay, so she can say, it's what it really means, the way the commentaries say, your bad luck caused this. In other words, it's not my fault that I got sick. I'm yours, and it's just your fault that I got it. Not that it's your fault, but it's no more my fault than your fault. So basically, can she say that? But let's say, okay, so imtim talomer, we're still in this flow chart. If you're going to say, she said, look, it's your tough luck. Well, pirsani damahu. This fascinating rabbi is talking about the likelihood of a woman's menstruating cycle coming at the right time. Okay, so let's think about how this goes. They plan the wedding a year in advance. If it happens to come out on the day that she's menstruating, well, is that her fault? Because she should have known, right? So Mao, bishat vestalo tibaila. If she gets her period regularly and it came out on a regular day she was anticipating to menstruate, then delo matya amrele, moving out of amabet, she can't say nistapchasadeu, it's your fault, because it's really her fault, because she knew that was a day that she was anticipating. Again, this is only on the track that she has a regular cycle and she saw when it's a regular cycle. So now, ki tibailach shelo b'shat vesta. But the question is really asked if she sees in a time that was not regular. Here's an interesting question. Do we say, my kevan de lo b'shat vesta havya, since it wasn't when she was anticipating, matzi amrle and istapchasadeu, she could say, listen, this isn't my fault. I had no idea that this was going to happen. O dilma kevan de ikanashe kamishnaya vestayu kishat vestadam. Or do we say, no, it is her fault because she should have anticipated that she'd be irregular. I saw someone wrote, right? Sometimes at stress periods, people see irregular. She should have anticipated that. And it's somewhat again, it's a little bit of a strange claim. What was she supposed to anticipate, right? But meaning it's not totally, even though it's totally out of her control because she can't really control when she menstruates. But the point is here, is it more similar to the fact that she planned a date that, again, also, even if you're going to be off, you might be off only within a range, and maybe she should have anticipated that and not planned exactly, then she should have planned a different day. Again, you have to wonder a year in advance. Very hard to anticipate when exactly you're going to irregularly menstruate. The whole thing is quite hard to understand. Again, maybe they didn't understand as much about vestod as women did. Good question. I don't know. Anyway, that's a list of all their questions. Okay, so which case do we say it really wasn't his doing at all, right? And therefore, he's not responsible to pay mizona. So Pashit Rav Chai explains, he's going to say, I'm going to learn it from the language of the Mishna there on Daf Nun Zayin. It says, Higiyazman v'lo nisu ochlo mishelo v'chlo b'tchuma. If the time came and they didn't marry, then they can eat the food and they eat the truma. Lo nasu lo katani. It doesn't say the men didn't marry the women. Ella lo nisu. It says they didn't get married by the men. So the focus is on the woman. So hechidami. What's the case? Itakama akvin inhu. If they cause the delay, so first of all, if they intentionally cause the delay, and lo nisu means the women, let's just put it, even though it's not decided, but let's say decided not to get married. Now, if they decided on purpose, of course they wouldn't get mizono. So it would have to be lo nisu. The women didn't get married. Why? Because they were honest, okay? Because it wasn't their fault. And alav de'inis, because otherwise it makes no sense. If she's the subject, then it makes it clear that it's because it was beyond her control. So kiagavna, right? De'inis kiagavna, in like the examples we gave. And yet they still get the food. So it sounds like if it was her fault, but honest fault, not like it was really her fault, she had no control over it, then she would actually get the food. So that's his answer, and he proves it from the language of the Mishna. Amar Rav Ashi, and then it's specifically her fault. Okay, if he's ones, then it wouldn't be. She wouldn't get the food. Okay, then you'll be able to claim ones, and I don't have to pay you. But Amar Rav Ashi laolam kol onsa lo achla. Rav Ashi says no. Any ones, she doesn't get food. Okay, he's honest, she's honest. If it's beyond people's control, she doesn't get to eat the food. Okay, the wedding didn't happen not because of anyone's intentions. That just didn't happen. Okay, then we just push off the wedding and we push off everything. Okay, Rav Ashi thinks she doesn't get anything. Why? Right? And this is because he can just claim. Remember, this is money things. Any monetary things basically means that he can claim, I don't owe you money right now because it was onus. Okay, this is often we say onus rachmana patre, you're exempt in cases of onus. Actually makes a lot of sense. So you're saying, so what about her? She eats from her father's house. It's not like we're leaving her on the street. What was she eating yesterday? So it's just he's not responsible for her yet. Okay, right? And either one of them. What does he do with this language that Rava, who is it? Rav Achai said that why did it not say lo nasu, right? It didn't say he didn't marry her, which would be his onus. It says if she didn't get married by him, which sounds like she, it's her thing. So why does it say it's specifically geared to her, not him? I'm sorry, because the beginning was talking about her, therefore the end was talking about her. In other words, the subject of the Mishna, okay, if you read the Mishna there, Rashi even tells you, you don't have to flip to Nun Zayin. Rashi says in the third line, they give a betula 12 months and almanah 30 days. This is actually the betrothal of an almanah was generally 30 days only. There was less to prepare for a wedding like that, second marriage. Anyway, the point is that the subject there was women, and therefore it said lo nisu was talking about the women, but you can't start deriving all sorts of things about who was onus and who wasn't, etc. Okay, so Rav Ashi ends up saying any onus is a valid claim of the husband. He can claim the reason we didn't get married was beyond anybody's control, and therefore I don't have to pay her yet. Comes Rava. And this is the first version of Rava. The second version of Rava is going to say the exact opposite. And now we're moving out of Ketubot into Gitin. And we're basically going to talk about a Gittin sugya. Amar Rava ulinyan Gitin enokim. When it comes to get, and a get that was given upon condition, and the condition wasn't fulfilled because of onus, that's irrelevant to us. Okay, so let's see. Alma kasava Rava, therefore Rava claims ein onus begitin. Okay, he claims you can't claim onus. So now we want to know Minale Laravaha. Where does he get this from? And we're going to bring three potential sources to try to prove it. In the end, we're going to say you can't prove it from either of these sources. And then we're going to say Rava must have come up with his own logical answer for this. In other words, he came to this through logic, not through earlier sources. Okay, because it's always, if you can bring a Tanaitic source, it's very solid. Logic is always good, but logic can be overridden. But right, we'd rather prove from sources, but we tried 3 Tanaitic sources, none of them work, so we go to that. What we're going to see tomorrow is the mirror image of this sugya, because we're going to see a different version of Rava, is that he said there is onus begitin, and then we're going to question it from all the sources that we used to try to prove that there's no onus begitin, and then we're going to basically say, again, the same answers we gave today. Oh, no, don't read it that way. Oh, no, don't read it that way. Oh, no, don't read it that way. So basically, again, all the sources are going to be inconclusive, not here as proof and not there as rejections of his approach or questions against him. So now, where does he get it from? If you want to learn it from the following Mishna. If a man says to a woman, this will be your get, if I don't show up here in 12 months, right, in the next 12-month period, this will be a get. And then he dies. So what should happen? He didn't show up. It should be a get. What does it say here? Ain't no get. It's not a get. Okay? Okay, this is not a get because he didn't, right? It should have been a get because he didn't show up, but he didn't show up because he died. Meitu de ain't no get. Why is Meitu de ain't, right? Now they're going to say like this. It sounds like only because he died, it's not a get. Because he didn't have an option to show up there, right? So because he was dead. But what if it sounds like if he was honest and didn't show up, get, it would be a get. Because what does he say? This will be your get if I don't show up. Now, he didn't show up, not because he didn't intend to show up, but because he was sick. Sounds like if he was sick, this would be a get. Why would this be a get? Because he didn't show up. We don't care why he didn't show up. Ain't onus begitin. You can't claim I was honest. I meant to get there and I didn't. So this would prove the fact that it says if he died, it's not a get. But if he was sick, it would be a get. Then you would say ain't onus begitin. So they say no. Maybe also if he got sick, it's not a get. And yesh onus begitin. He could claim, I really meant to show up. I just didn't because I got sick. And maybe we would accept that. Why did it say death then? What they wanted to tell us is that if he gave her this get upon condition and then he dies, since she didn't have the get yet, the get was only supposed to be valid after 12 months. Well, then when we give her the get after 12 months, he's dead. And ain't get la'achar mita. You can't get a get after you die. There is no such thing. So that's what it's coming to teach us. So now the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Ain't get la'achar mita, hatana la reisha. It already says in the beginning of that Mishna that there's no such thing as a get after death. So you don't need this part to tell you that because it already says that explicitly. Where does it say that? He said one of the following three languages. It says right there in that same source. This will be your get if I die. Okay, why is he doing this? Probably to avoid the wife doing yibum. We've talked about this, right? On one hand, right, came up in the siyum last night that it was good. Sometimes the husband wanted the wife to do yibum to know that she was taken care of. Sometimes the husband didn't want the wife to do yibum at all. He wanted to let her get out of it, maybe also in days when they only did chalitza, we wanted her to avoid the miserable ceremony of chalitza. So he says, in the event that I die, this will be a get. You can't do that because there's no such thing as get after me. This will be your get if I die from this disease. He's sick, right? Sick in bed. He said, if I die from this, please, this will be your get. This will be your get after I die. Any of those languages is irrelevant. So you can't say again, what are we trying to do? If the case was talking only about death and not about sickness, then we'd be able to say, there's Rava's proof. Yesh onus, right? That there's no onus begitin. You can't claim I was sick and I didn't get there, right? Your get's going to be a get no matter what. Only death, no, because ain't get la'achar mita. But if it's but then they said, no, it means also if you're sick. The reason they specifically said death was not to say exclude sickness. It was saying death to say ain't get la'achar mita. But we already learned that. So you can't claim that, in which case we're back to square one. It's death only, not sickness. It proves Rava's point. To which the Gemara says, no. Maybe it's coming to disagree with the rabbis. In other words, there's two types of get la'achar mita, and one of them is clear. If I die, that for sure doesn't work. But our case is a little different because he gives her the get now, and then he says it'll only be valid in 12 months, but she already has the get in hand. And the get already has a date on it of today. And not 12 months from now. And the death happened after today. So in that case, there's a machloket between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda about whether it's valid or not. And the rabbi's side, we're going to see right now, Titania, the rabbi said she can go get married. She doesn't have to do yibum in that case. The get is valid. Our Mishna said, if he dies after, right, the get was given at a certain date, and then, but it's only valid 12 months. He dies in the interim. No, that's get la'achar mita. So maybe they brought that case to say ain't get la'achar mita. And specifically right then, they're only saying death because they wanted to teach you ain't get la'achar mita because it's not the same as the other case. The other case, everyone agreed. This is a machloket. And maybe they're trying to say we disagree with the rabbis. The rabbis think this would be a valid get because this isn't considered get la'achar mita. And therefore, right? And therefore, that's why it says death. But it would be the same for sick also. It's not coming to exclude sick, in which case you can't use this as a proof. And now they want to know, Mam Rabotenu, who are these rabbis? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Beitina Desharu Mishcha. This is the beitin that permitted the oil of Gentiles. That's the whole sugya in Avodah Zarah. We'll get there. It's just identifying who the people were. V'savrela ki Rabbi Yossi. They held like Rabbi Yossi to Amar Zmano Shel Shtar Mochiach Halav. Because the date is in the the date proves that there's a valid get, because the date, if you say, this will be your get if I die, there's no date in it. That's just saying whatever date I die, take this document, it will go into effect. But the get where he says from 12 months, right? In 12 months, if I don't show up, this will be a get, that had a date on it. We go by the date then. So that was before his death. So that's why the rabbis think this is a valid get. And that's why the Mishna specifically said, no, we disagree with the rabbis, right? The Mishna was saying the opinion that goes against Rabbi Yossi and the rabbis. So let's try another source. And let me say, second attempt. Now is a different case. Me'achshav, this will be your get. This is even more so. This will be your get in 12 months. This will be your get now. Im lo bati mikam vad yubeh chodesh. If I don't show up in the next 12 months. Umeit b'toch 12 chodesh harei ze get. So now, again, what does it say? If he dies within the 12 months, this will be a get according to everybody, because he said me'achshav. In this case, it's clear the get is starting now, and that's before he dies, even though it's not really starting now, right? It's only going to be effective in 12 months, but because you said the words me'achshav and the guy died, it actually works. V'hu adin l'chala. Now, obviously, if it works, if he didn't show up because he's dead, obviously it's going to work if you don't show up because you're sick, right? Dead is much more onus than sick. So, right, because sick, maybe you could somehow manage to get there. But if it's not going to be, right, if we're going to say this get is valid, it counts, I didn't show up because I was dead, it's going to count if you're sick. So now, right, again, they're going to say, no, Dilma meitafka. Maybe it really only is dead. What really he was trying to do, what was his whole motivation here? He wanted to say, if I die, this will be your get so that you don't have to do yibum, which means it was really only said for a case where he was dead. And that's why if he dies, it's going to be valid, because that's exactly what he was trying to do. But if he gets sick, that's irrelevant. That's not a thing, in which case you can't learn from this anything, because it has nothing to do with being sick. Okay, third and last attempt, which is also going to be unsuccessful. If I don't show up between now and 30 days, this will be your get. So what happens if and he gets there at the end of the third, on day number 30, okay? But all of a sudden there's this river in between him and there, and the ferry boat is not operating on that day, and he can't get across the river to get to her. Amarlu, chazu he says to people, look, I'm trying to get there, be my witness, and I'm trying to get there, because he doesn't want the get to be valid. So this guy is basically saying, I don't want this to be a get, and yet it's going to be a get because the condition is going to come into effect because he doesn't show up. And Amar Shmuel, let's see what the halacha is. Lav shmei matya. This is considered he did not get to the city. So what do you see here? Ein onis begitin. This is really proof for Rava, right? You can't claim I was trying to get there and I just couldn't, and therefore you try to say my get is canceled. No, you can't do that. So the Gemara says, and I talked about this more on Shabbat stuff, so you can listen there, tomorrow's stuff, which is going to go up after class today. But Dilma onse de shachiach shani. This is a much more common type of onus, right? To be there and the river, right? You knew that to get to that city or wherever she was, there was a river, and you knew that maybe this would happen, or you delayed. How often do we get there just a little bit late, right? You just missed the deadline because we always push things to the last minute. We procrastinate. Anyway, because of that, he should have known that would have possibly happened, and therefore he should have stipulated such that if I don't show up within 30 days or some other, or I end up just not, right? Like when you put in contracts, right? What if, something happens, some drastic, I don't know what, so you should have put it in the contract originally. And since you didn't, it's your fault. And that's why he loses out, not because ein onis begitin. So in the end, the Gemara says we can't learn from either of those three sources. Amar Rava, ela Rava svarad denashe kamar mishum snuot and mishum prutzot. This will explain in tomorrow's class what this is, but comes up with his own answer. Why ein onis begitin? And it's because of different types of women. Some are snuot, very humble, and some are prutzot, which could either mean, right, they engage in licentious behavior. It could also just mean they're very arrogant and they don't really care about things. And we're going to see what this means and what this has anything to do with. So I'll leave you a little bit in suspense. Wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom.